Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and once again we're talking with Professor O about movies. And in this movie, Star Trek the Motion Picture, it has been cussed and discussed, as they say. And we want to mention before we get too far gone, O, that there is the new Strange New Worlds coming up this week. So that is Thursday at whatever time that it drops. I imagine midnight, and so we'll be watching that, and I'll have a review out on that as quickly as I can. But
Oh, absolutely.
right now, we want to talk about the motion picture, and I have to say that it had about as many problems as we've had trying to put this podcast together today. Inside joke. We've
Thank
had.
goodness we still have our jobs, unlike that first
That's true.
special effects company.
That's true. We've had. We're both supposed to be technical people, and we have not proven ourselves very well at that. But oh well. Anyway, but we were talking about this film as a series of mistakes that somehow made a good film with a good box office. It had problems with continual rewrites through it. It had problems with special effects. The first special effects house had to be thrown out altogether because it just didn't come out viewable. And the second special effects house, which was Douglas Trumbull, did a good enough job, but didn't have enough time to really put any polish on it. And so what we see is a unfinished film, really, by the time, and it had to come out on December 7th, 1979. That was the only thing. They had all the money that they could use for it, but and they had Robert Wise to direct it, and they had the whole cast there after some discussion, and everything else, it seems, fell apart in between. And amazingly, they were able to pull it up together for it to make the film. Where did you see Star Trek when it first came out?
I saw it. I know I was in. I might have been in a theater in Denton.
Yeah,
I know. One theater I enjoyed it. Probably saw. I thought I saw it four times, and at the drive-in theater, you could listen to it on FM radio
yeah,
by like early 1980 because he kept on running. It started December 7th at the
yeah,
drive-in. I think it was almost maybe February or March. It was still there,
yes,
still here, old friend. It was still there at the drive-in, and listening to it on FM radio. I think I just sat in the hood of a car. And that was, oh man, because that's one thing. The soundtrack is Jerry Goldsmith's score is incredible. And you know what? Which is interesting in our attempts to get ourselves going here. Apparently, even Jerry Goldsmith had trouble with the score because the first run through, it's very evocative. But and Robert Wise is an old friend of Jerry Goldsmith, but
yeah.
he said there's no theme here. There's no real theme. So Jerry Goldsmith went back. It was more mood music, and then he went back and came up with the theme to the next
Yeah,
generation. I
if
mean, you
you've
talk
if
about
you've
an
seen you've
incredible
seen the
theme.
special feature on that where he goes to his assistant and says, "What do you think it sounds like?" And they said, "Think it sounds like sailing ships." And he said, "Well, I think it sounds like covered wagons." And
Right.
it did actually when you think about if you've heard the first version of it, but they actually auditioned the change with two pianos. They went to
That's
Robert
right.
Wise's house and they performed it on two pianos.
That's right. And Robert Wise says, "You got it.
Yeah,
Take that one."
and
So
that's
yeah, we.
one of the best
Oh,
legacies of that film is that.
music, 100%.
Yeah,
Speaking of legacies, that is it. Just that's one of the things that worked out the best. I mean,
yeah,
the especially the first time through. It's improved since then with the ABC rerunning of the film, adding 15 more minutes of film, and then it
yes.
improved again after Robert Wise. Finally, 20 years later, gets to take the film what was basically a rough cut run for it, the rough cut being designed so that the editor and even test audiences can go back and forth. That never happened. The test
That's
audiences were
right.
the paying
There
audiences.
was no test audience. Yeah,
None.
Robert Wise said it was the first film he'd ever made where there wasn't a sneak preview.
Yeah,
where
that's
they're made
exactly
that way so they can go back and fix whatever was wrong with it. And
right.
last week we were talking about the fact that the that film had been, what did we talk about last week? Now I've forgotten.
Forbidden Planet.
Forbidden Planet was so good that they didn't have to make any changes to it after a sneak preview. So that's what happens in a case where this film actually needed a sneak and wasn't able to get one because the schedule had to be held. They'd already
Right.
rented out the theaters and everything was scheduled and months ahead of time, and so it just had to come out whether it was any good or not. And thankfully, the fans came through for it, and it worked. I had some problems with some of the writing on it, but that was another problem. They had finally Alan Dean Foster, and who else was it that was writing on that?
Livingston.
David Livingston, right?
Right.
And every time that they would come out with a draft, the studio would say, "We need something bigger."
Right.
It
And you
says,
got Gene
well,
Roddenberry in there
what if
wanting
the
to put his
Enterprise flies into the
thumbprints.
sun and destroys the entire solar system? No, that's not big enough. And so it was just that where they had to come up with this. And what they pieced together was basically something that was made for the unproduced TV series Star Trek Phase 2.
Right. Right. Was the name of that In Thy Image?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And that's the Alan Dean Foster treatment,
Yes.
maybe? Or yeah, right. Right. And yeah, Star Trek Phase 2, an idea absolutely for Star Trek Phase 2. And then that keeps getting changed around, and Gene Roddenberry gets mixed in, and of course, which is understandable, the creative Star Trek,
Sure.
creator of Star Trek, but is going to rewrite anybody.
But
And
by that time, he was in his utopia phase in which nobody could fight.
right.
And one of the critics at the time said what they didn't like about this was that not a phaser was fired, not a fight scene was anywhere. It was all just we're riding along watching this, and at the end, find out what it is, and then the thing with Decker. And I mean, there was some disagreement with between Kirk and Decker, where there was tension between them because
Right.
Kirk took the ship back and Decker thought that he was being sidelined, and
Right.
was the truth.
Funny, the first time, I don't know how you felt that the first time, back when I'm, 22, 23, watching it,
Yeah.
21, 22, watching it, and I thought, what are you doing with Kirk? This doesn't feel right. Watching it now, though, I get it, and it's some really good dramatic tension. Sometimes the original series did not have enough friction between the ensemble cast.
Yeah.
Sometimes once in a while, I like some friction between the ensemble cast.
Mm-hmm.
And this certainly had friction, and Kirk was way out of line, and written to be, and it almost mirrors. It's funny, we were talking about how uncomfortable he could be in terms of he's a bit insecure. He's coming back from
Yeah.
acting in other things, and now he's back to Captain Kirk again.
Yeah,
Counting how
somebody
many
in the
lines
theater
he's
that
got.
I watched it in yelled "T.J. Hooker" when he came on camera for the
Yeah.
first time. So
Exactly. So he's counting lines and insecure, and it's just like his character. And but it actually now I didn't have any trouble with it at all. Now I thought that was some pretty good dynamic tension.
yeah,
And it's so rare that Kirk is wrong. In the original series, Kirk was hardly ever wrong. You had the Organians, where the pacifist planet, and Kirk and in the original series, Kirk and the Klingons wanted to have a war, and they just would not let them have a war. So you can kind of and they didn't need it at the end of the day. They didn't need World War III,
yeah,
but or whatever World War it would have been, Galactic War, but so you could say Kirk's wrong in that instance, but very rarely is he wrong. Here he is just not in good mental shape at all, and doing the wrong thing. You can even, he's pushing everybody so hard. Even that first transporter accident, it's hard to say that that's not a little bit on Kirk. And I used to have collecting cards where you could see what happened to the people, to Commander Somak, I think it was,
Sonak, yeah.
and in the original script or novelization, that was Kirk's love interest at the time that also was killed, and but not in the movie script, so he doesn't react accordingly.
Yeah.
But still, but one thing, and we didn't get to this before, Professor B, but it's one thing that's kind of out of order in the film is you have this horrible transporter accident because Kirk, resuming command of the Enterprise, push, and he's pushing everything.
Well, that was one of my favorite scenes. We've always had transporter problems, but they've either come in just fine or they've gone away completely. And this one, they actually just kind of melt. And I'm thinking that's believable.
What we got didn't live very long, fortunately. I mean, it was, and then McCoy, it's like they should have done this in backwards order. They should have beamed McCoy aboard first, because when they beam McCoy aboard, it's after that, and McCoy's doing his usual routine of you're not gonna, and I'm like, nobody
making sure all his pieces are in place. And although I think that he had a good point by that time, it was
exactly
there's no paranoia in here. He's already seen what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, in real time, it was like 20 minutes ago. We got these mutated things. But oh no, Kirk's tension is fantastic, and I really like that. I appreciate that now. I appreciate him pushing all the wrong buttons. It means later, and of course it creates consequences later on. But it does show a true arc there. He's got to learn and grow. And we were talking about this too. The character of Stephen Collins, he said that he was such a young actor playing Decker. He wished he would have gone back, done some more research on his own, maybe come up with a backstory, a little bit of method acting, which he wasn't doing at the time. But he said some of that was in the script, and there was one thing. And this, I know we're jumping around the movie a little bit, but I think when the one thing that maybe should have been put in was a little reaction on his part to when Ilia died, because Ilia, that was a real love interest of Decker's.
Yes.
And she basically dies. She comes back as a robot, but she dies, and there's really not much emotion on his part. He's furious, and he tells Kirk, now that's, you're taking before the...
That's my definition of unwarranted. Yeah.
Exactly.
I thought it was a good
because he felt Kirk had been taking unwarranted risks.
I thought Stephen Collins did a generally good job with the character. I found him to be a little less forward than someone who had just been made a captain would be. I would have expected him to be a little more confident than he was, and not quite as... let's say in awe of Kirk.
Right. I agree. I think he could, and he also felt like the character's humorless, and he would have tried to add a little. He was so dogmatic in certain things that he would have tried to add some humor.
Yeah. I had a problem with how they tried to put the humor in this, though. They went by just using, lines. McCoy had, 3 one-liners right off the transporter pad, and they were old jokes. And this is something I've seen throughout the Star Trek movies. They got to go back and tell that same joke over and over and over. And, it's like a little kid who tells you the same joke over and over. It's not funny after the second or third time. You just have to kind of pretend to laugh at it. And they've done that with so many reused lines. Spock in the observation lounge saying, that's a logical conclusion. And, the audience laughed at that in the theater I was in. But I thought, all right, write something new.
Find something new. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I do like that line of Kirk's. They have us right where they want us.
Yes, I liked that. Yeah. And we have them right where they want us. That was a line. It was good.
And that kind of showed Kirk's evolution as he started to smile more. Kirk and Decker, they start to actually get along together as a mission. But all that writing, I mean, how much of that writing was in the script? How much of it was done almost on a daily basis? It's amazing it came off as well as it did. I think one thing, Professor B, we didn't mention is in that, this had the 1979 cut of the film that went to theaters. It was literally wet in the can.
Yes.
The reels of film were wet, and they said it'll just dry when you run them as a projectionist. that would have kind of, as a projectionist, that would have bugged me. I never saw. I was not a projectionist by the time Star Trek came around, the motion picture, and having a film that's almost dripping and drying in the projector sounds kind of funky to me.
Yeah.
But
interestingly,
yeah,
I
it
was
was.
in Oklahoma City when we first saw that. I was in
Yeah,
school,
yeah. Where were you?
and yeah, there was one theater that had Dolby Stereo at that time, and it was way on Northwest 63rd Street. It's about as far north in Oklahoma City you could go before you saw just prairie land, and it was a mall theater. So surprisingly the audio was good. The picture wasn't so much, but it was full of people, some of them cosplaying, and there was a lot of discussion among the people after the film had spooled out. It was an experience like I've never had before
Oh, absolutely.
because we went and saw it on the premiere day,
Say it again.
and we went to see it on the premiere day. So it was,
Oh,
yeah,
I did miss that. I missed the feeling of seeing it with fellow Trekkies. Yeah, I would have loved that. Would have that by the time I saw it, even though I saw it 4 times, the numbers had thinned down, and
yeah,
there wasn't that opening day. That opening day experience is fantastic for
yeah.
any Star Trek fan. Yeah, were people making the connections though? And again, I really like this film. I think it's grown in stature. I think not just with technical cutting, they've added in scenes they should never have taken away from when we saw it in 1979,
Yes.
like the scene of Spock crying with that single tear, saying, "I weep
Right.
for
We never
V'Ger."
found out really what Spock found out. And it was just,
Oh, in the mind meld.
yeah, I must mind
Right,
meld. And then, Kirk is standing outside the ship waiting for him to come floating back. How did he know this? But, and then, they revive Spock and he says, simple feeling. And they say, well, wait a minute. Is that all you found out? I mean, and now we know exactly what to do with him. There was a lot of holes in it as they went to the bridge and knew what they were supposed to do by that time because they really left out all of the exposition.
right. And some of that exposition might have come in the director's cut a little bit more
It
with
did.
the
Yeah.
machine planet. Yeah, you get
Yeah.
the machine planet. You find out what Spock learned. It's critical.
Yeah.
And then what he learned affected him, and to me, in a profound way that lasted through the entire run of the rest of Star Trek, even in Next Generation.
Yeah.
Spock
It very
finds
much
himself.
explained his dichotomy he's always had between being alien and human. And that, of course, was thrown completely out in the original theatrical cut. And
Right.
that's a shame. So it was a much better film, obviously, with the director's cut. It's a shame we couldn't have
Right.
seen that when it first came out. I might have waited another month. But, who knows if that would have made enough difference.
Yeah, that comfort level that Spock had, that he could live within his own skin. Now that
Yeah.
he understood the importance that where emotions fit in,
And they do
where
draw on
does
that further on, where in Star Trek Two,
right.
and then also in Star Trek Six. I've been dead, and there then others where once again in Star Trek Six he tells Valeris, logic is not the end of wisdom; it's the beginning.
Is the beginning, and that all came from V'Ger.
Right.
And as much as people from '79, because they really, speaking of dichotomies, there were haters of the film, and there were people that liked the film, and
Yeah.
and I get the criticism. I'm less critical now than I was then, but when ABC restored some of those scenes, and all of a sudden you could see this. If nothing else, I mean, this is such a foundational character who
Yeah.
finds himself. That makes the whole thing worth it, even
I
if
think
it
so.
could be kind of long at times. It still makes it worth it. Spock's journey, and I love the fact they never turn back from that. The way he talks to Valeris in Wrath of Khan, he becomes a mentor for Jim, and he calls the minute he's been through that thing, he and V'Ger, even at the beginning, he calls him Jim and grabs his hand.
Yeah.
It's so important. David Gerald, which if you haven't, I know you've got the book,
I
but
do.
out there, this is a fantastic book.
Yes,
And David
it
Gerald,
is.
this was the later edition. He wrote this when like in 1970, 1969. Then he updated it to encompass, more films.
I don't know which
And
version I have.
you see You've got
I have the same one as you do.
the same one. Goes all the way to Star Trek 3.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's so, and then and you know, and that he really, I know we both noticed the importance of putting those Spock scenes back.
Yeah.
But and he does too, and he just writes beautifully about how poignant and important that is for Spock's character.
Yes.
And then we were talking the oh, I know one thing. Just speaking of the length of the film, we were talking about you and I can find places to cut, but we would never cut that tour of one of the most important characters of Star Trek, and that's the character of the Enterprise. And
yes.
when that character comes back, and and some people say that's 20 minutes of touring around the, you know, and it's only about 5 minutes, but it's incredible. I love that. Yeah,
it really was. And the music that went with it was perfect too. Once they had that worked out, and with you know, the original that was done, that was a little more backgroundy, and didn't really have it. Basically, he had written a theme song for Kirk and for Ilia, and didn't do one for the Enterprise, and that's what he needed because the Enterprise was a character.
Arguably the most important character has got to have a theme song.
Yes.
And went back and you know, apparently we were talking about how the model and how awesome the model was. The way it was the first model that I can remember, maybe 2001, but to have spotlights on the model itself, because you know, in deep space, one of the cinema, I think John Dykstra maybe mentions that, you know, you've got your key light as the sun in space. But when they're in space, when they're in the solar system, but when they're in deep space, they're not near enough to stars.
Right. They cheated it in the TV series, just like they made rocket engine sounds, which you wouldn't hear. But they did do. They had some internal and external lighting of the ship in order for it to show off various parts of it, I think. And I understand it was a spider web of wires that they had to control.
Oh gosh, yeah, spider web out of, and apparently the little mirrors that your dentist uses. They used a big light, and they would reflect them into it. They had this bank of little mirrors, and they'd turn the little mirrors on the model of the Enterprise.
Yes.
And it sells completely. It looks like there's a spotlight it's maybe a spotlight from one of the nacelles shining on the body of the Enterprise. And it just is amazing. One thing I was going to ask, Professor B, one thing I was going to ask was, in Oklahoma City, put it this way, do you remember when people started to say, I like this movie, could be kind of slow, but this was like this episode of Star Trek, or maybe these 2 episodes of Star Trek? Do you remember that? I think
somebody did mention when I was sitting across from someone at lunch at the university cafeteria there, that it did seem a whole lot like the Nomad from what was it, the Changeling? Is that what they called that?
Changeling. Yeah. Right. And apparently in doing the research, it's a lot like Nomad. Nomad was going to get rid of the going to sterilize the carbon units.
And he was looking for his creator. Yeah.
Is that what?
And he was looking for his creator.
Right. He's looking for his creator. Right. Looking for his creator.
Jackson Roy Kirk.
Yeah, Jackson Roy Kirk. I mean, and you know, maybe it's because of 20 years later, I'm just more forgiving of that. In Star Trek canon, you have to accept that there was this advanced past Voyager probe that we sent out, maybe I'm guessing 2050, 2060 in Star Trek time. And then Nomad merges with that. And then completely separately, you've got Voyager, which apparently goes through a black hole, and on the trip to the black hole encounters the machine planet, or the machine planet encounters V'ger, and then makes a huge machine to come back and find the creator.
Yeah, there's some people that think that V'ger might have been part of the Borg or had met the Borg, and they had done that.
Machine.
Although I think that was shot down by an interview with, I forget who,
Bijo Trimble, somebody really connected to
somebody
canon.
somebody that knew what they're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah. But that's a fascinating thought
yeah,
that would be a Borg planet. And you think about it, it wanted to assimilate us, and it assimilates Decker.
it does.
Well, they merge.
They merge. They don't really show what they turned into though. So
Decker's head,
they might have
Decker's
had a
hair
little
stands
laser
on
thing.
end.
Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, that's an interesting. But that's were there any more? The idea that that God is in a Star Trek ship, the idea of meeting a higher power, almost godlike, feels like it's in Trek. It's embedded in the DNA
it
of
is.
Gene Roddenberry for sure.
Well, I mean, they have all kinds of godlike computers. They had Vol, they had Landru. What else? There are a number of these things
The
where,
M5 even.
well,
Uh,
yeah, kind
yeah,
of, yeah,
and they had and then so you had godlike computer. What they had the computer with was it Lee Merriweather
yes,
where her planet.
right. I don't remember the name of the episode. Yeah, but that was another one where they she was there to defend whoever was left, and nobody was really
That's
left.
exactly right.
And
That's
yeah,
exactly
that
right.
was another one of those computer controlled things.
And then there's meeting Apollo. I'm just thinking of all the time the godlike type
Yeah, that's
and
true
Star
with
Trek Five.
Apollo, and then um, they talked about followers of the sun in this episode where
Bread and circuses.
bread and circuses. No, this was another that was. No, you're right. It was bread and circuses.
Right. Followers of the sun.
I know
Yeah,
better
so
than
many.
doubt you there.
And Star Trek Five,
Yeah.
for sure. Maybe even you could say the Save the Whales, Star Trek Four. Idea, and that one, the Earth was going to be basically that probe was going to destroy the Earth until it could hear from the whales.
It was going
Until
to
it could hear
continue
from.
searching by vaporizing the ocean until I could find them, and that would have destroyed the Earth. I don't think they intended
Right.
to. They just it was just collateral damage.
Exactly. In searching for the whales. That's exactly. But and it's funny. I love most of those individual episodes, but there is a lot of God search for God. But and I've read, and this is another thing too, in looking at the special edition. The one thing that, for all its warts, that come from the original, all the writing problems and
Yes.
everything, it's still big science fiction. It's not a space opera. With bad guys necessarily.
It's not a
Darth
Western.
Vader. It was
And
that.
a lot of people said that Star Wars was basically a Western just put in
Right.
space, and this Star Trek movie certainly was not. It
Was not. These
it
are
was
big
not,
science
it was not
fiction
good. It was
ideas.
not good and evil. It was not a showdown. It was a try to understand the other side
Who we are.
and who we are, who they are, and what we have in common. And that's a big concept, considering that they were trying to make a Hollywood film out of it.
It's an amazing cuts. Yes, that's the 2001 side of things, and I respect them for doing that. It just, in watching this again, I'm thinking, can you think? I put it this way. I don't want to throw a curveball at you. I'm having trouble thinking of a recent film that feels like that, where you're really looking at speculative fiction and a little bit of the meaning of life, and and as we age, the things we think about, a little bit of philosophy, maybe Interstellar to a
Yeah,
point.
Interstellar, I think, would be the closest to that.
Right. And I keep thinking of Christopher Nolan films
Yeah,
when and I
would
know
make
there's some
sense.
more out, but I respect, and that's another reason I respect this film. Does it make it makes it ponderous at times, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, we've got stuff to
And it was
ponder.
good on that level. I mean, it made you think about these things if you paid more attention to the story than McCoy's jokes.
And maybe that's part of the director's cut is it cleaned up some of those things. Maybe they should have
Yeah.
zapped one joke. I got to admit, one joke that got me, but now that I think about it, I'm thinking, has this been recycled? Because when McCoy says, engineers, they love to change things. And and that
That
was
was a new
probably a
joke, and it
recycle.
was all right. But I mean,
It
it
was a
just
new,
had to
okay.
it had to go in rapid fire along with why is everything we don't know called a thing, and the transporter joke. I mean, they ran everything all at once, and they could have just never brought McCoy back into the picture after that.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a good point. He has one good line with, I think, it's in that when Spock is crying and with that single tear, and I think it's McCoy that maybe says, uh, McCoy says, "Is this all there is?" Or McCoy kind of sees the tear, and I think, he, Spock says, "I cry for V'ger." I think it's McCoy said, or it may have been Kirk that says, "Not for us," and that's such a nice little bridge.
Yeah,
Choir,
yeah.
but you're not crying for yourself. It's for V'ger, and yeah, it just
The other thing that bothers me in this film is they really didn't make very good use of Scotty. Scotty couldn't figure out how to balance the warp engines, but Spock came in and just with his, his Kodak and and whatever he had with him, was able to rebalance the warp engines. And they didn't really give Scotty much to do except for his nephew, which in the first cut they didn't identify as his nephew. But
right.
then when he's killed in the no, that's the wrong film. Okay,
Wrath
forgive
of
me.
Khan is the yeah.
Yeah, that's
The other
that's the second one. But they did the same thing with him. Unfortunately, they really didn't give him anything good to do
no
until Star Trek 3, I think.
right
But I was
right and
disappointed in how little they used Scotty in this.
as you can tell, I'm a huge Scotty fan.
Yeah, he basically drives the shuttle pod. Um,
Right. I
uh,
love that line though. The admiral that Captain Kirk had to talk into giving him the command bag. Any man that could do this with Nagura, I'll have this ship ready. Yeah, I could
yeah,
not something like I could not turn down. I will have this ship ready.
yeah, yeah.
And
She'll launch on time and she'll be ready. And
exactly.
that
Yeah.
was
That's
yeah, and that was all he got. Otherwise, it was just him. Um, they run to the transporter room.
yeah, and it's Spock going to. You had such a good point too, because Spock going to. I did not like that either. Spock going to engineering, and it reminds me yet again. And this was one thing David Gerald, and I'll hold up the book again. David Gerald was always saying, "No, your captain should never leave the captain's chair. If
Yeah,
you're looking at a captain of an aircraft carrier or a capital ship, the captain does not hit the beaches. He sends the away team, which they developed in Next Gen,
they
to
did.
hit the beaches." But even Kirk has to go out, leave the ship
Although in
in
Doctor
a
Strangelove, Slim Pickens rides the bomb down, so he was.
oh, that's B. That's a good precedent there.
Yeah,
Yep. And so yeah, so Kirk does the same thing, leaves the ship, and I'm with you. You said something earlier that is so true. When Spock comes back, and there he is outside leaving the ship. He should have left the ship, but he catches Spock, and I'm with you. Why? He just goes thunk and stays put. He doesn't float.
yeah,
And it's always struck me. Even in the director's cut, he still just catches him.
right, because it was a dummy, and he was standing
Yeah,
on a box. But yeah, they didn't in the theatrical cut. They didn't show how he knew to be out there when Spock came back,
right.
and thankfully in the director's cut they do indicate that he had followed Spock out there and was just waiting until Spock came back.
Yeah, yeah. That's
So it makes some
right.
sense there.
That's exactly right. In the director's cut, that's the way it's left. I think one thing we may have mentioned a little bit is that I was thinking about different actors and acting. We talked a little bit, talked some about the script and all the problems they had,
Yeah,
needing, and apparently Shatner says it was my idea to come. I think he participated in it, but to come up with the idea of the merging where Decker merges with V'ger, and Stephen Collins was concerned about his backstory. But one thing that I wish he would have reacted to Ilea's death, what a little bit more
Yeah.
at that point. But other than that, like you mentioned, I think his acting was good. What did you think about Ilea? Basically Miss India from 1965,
Yes,
I think.
Persis Kambata, George Takei described her as just absolutely gorgeous in person, and had obviously the shape of the head where she could handle not losing her attractiveness by having her head shaved. And she
Right.
actually had her head shaved. They offered to put a prosthetic on, but she said no, that she would have her head shaved and make it work, and it did. I think that generally speaking, she played it well enough. I mean, she's aloof, and that's to be expected because of her celibacy oath, and then later
Right.
as the basically android Ilea, she is to look a bit mechanical or a bit foreign. So that works for her, I think.
I do too. I agree. And I thought, wow, for somebody that's basically untrained, I thought her ability to go back and forth when she is Ilea,
Yes.
when she is V'ger, or the representation of V'ger, and then she remembers Decker, and it's so subtle, but it's poignant.
Yeah.
When and her eyes are kind of well up, and you can tell that memory is coming back for her,
Yes.
and it's just a fantastic job. So yeah. Yeah, I thought she was terrific too. It's funny. The parts, I think, eventually it's taken years, but the parts are finally starting to add up for me
Yeah.
for the film. Um,
Well,
I
obviously,
read,
that film allowed Star Trek II to get made, and they
yes,
realized that one of their problems with this is trying to de age all of these people who are obviously 20 years older, not 5 years older. And so they made it kind of the central core of Star Trek II that they were all getting long in the tooth and maybe past their prime. And they made that even more in Star Trek III, where Mr. Excitement tells Uhura that her career is winding down.
that is a brilliant point. And what's fascinating, I didn't even catch that till this viewing. I don't think I thought about it in '79, but yes, in '79, when you think about how much in terms of Federation time that they've aged, I think they're saying it's basically about 3.5 years because they were on
Yeah,
TV for 3 years, so 2 more years to finish the 5-year mission, and then an 18-month refit of the Enterprise, and that's it.
yeah,
But they've all aged as human beings, as actors, 10 years,
right.
and I thought it's
Shatner
so
went on a
important.
crash diet. Everybody else was shot with soft focus lenses. They had heavy makeup to try to keep them from looking as old as they were. And, time wasn't kind with any of them, honestly.
Right, time does not stand still,
No.
and I that yeah, and so you're exactly right, and until this go around and reading some more, I had not thought about how start, and these are foundational important things. So it's funny, there are writers, and I really like Vivian Sobchak. You'll come across in like science fiction theory,
Yeah.
you come across Sobchak, and she's got some fascinating things, but and she points out that this discrepancy in time, and she says, okay, in 2 and 3, then we go over human aging and what it is to age, and what it is to change and face aging, face mortality,
Yeah.
face
Yeah.
needing reading glasses, hearing aids, all the things we have to deal with. I love that about Star Trek too. She does not, though. She says it's kind of a diversion from more pure science fiction, and she kind of views it as she feels like we're caught up into a gigantic loop of nostalgia. That's hard to argue,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, I thought, okay, still, what are your films going to be about? And being something about the human condition and us as we age, I think works perfectly fine. And then you get into, like you mentioned, the generational thing, and I love that about Star Trek Three. What was the line you just said when Uhura says she's talking to the guy, the young guy, and she
Yeah.
says,
She says, I'll have Mr. Excitement eating out of the palm of my hand.
"Yeah, that's right." And it's just, I mean,
Have you,
it's
you know,
you know
she says, he says, these people left without a pass. What are you going to do about it? She said, I'm not going to do anything about it. He said, have you lost your sense of reality? And she pulls a phaser on him and says, this isn't reality. This is fantasy. Now you're going to get in the closet. And he,
I love that.
yeah,
Because there's a generational difference there too, and between
yeah,
Uhura and this younger generation and of course that's a classic, old generation, but
oh
still,
yeah,
but you kind of feel that in the '80s. You're thinking
yeah,
it really speaks to the '80s and to what's happening maybe to some of the youth of the '80s in terms of losing some of those timeless values, and you discover those timeless values as you explore aging in
yeah.
those. So that's I love the fact that they said no, this is who we are. We really have aged, and I think that's fantastic. One thing I came across in reading about the novelization, because Gene Roddenberry, Alan Dean Foster did the novelizations for so many films.
Yes,
He did the novelizations for the animated series, but Gene Roddenberry actually wrote the novelization for the movie.
I did not know that.
And yeah, he actually, and so nobody could go back and correct him. It's his novelization for the film. And apparently there's some a lot of it is the film, but
Yeah,
what they did is they re-released the novelization at the 20th anniversary of, I think they just re-released it fairly recently. I want to say I want to say maybe they re-released it with the director's cut, but I think they also re-released it maybe in 2020 or 2021. Re-released the novelization by Roddenberry, and apparently, well, and this will come as no surprise with Roddenberry, there's a lot more apparently sex in the
of course
in
there
the
is.
novelization. But the other thing is, Captain Kirk ponders about two types of Federation officers, and he almost calls them two types of human beings. And one is the kind of old school Federation officers like Kirk, Scotty, Spock
Yeah,
himself, kind of old school. And then the other are more intellectual. He views them in some respects as more intellectual, but less fly by the seat of your pants, more by the book. And so apparently, even in 1979, when he's writing this, you can see Roddenberry pondering the difference of the next generation type characters in Star Trek, where you can
yeah,
really see these are different people than the original Trek crew.
right.
Um, yeah, that always kind of got me about next gen. I wasn't crazy about next gen with that type of character at first. I was kind of more of a
Yeah, it's they wanted to kind of put, Riker in place of Kirk, and I saw what they were trying to do at first, and then they backed away from that, and once Patrick Stewart kind of got the hang of what they wanted him to do there, it got a whole lot better. And I think
it
also,
did.
Roddenberry was the best rewrite man in Hollywood. That's how he got Star Trek to begin with, cleared through
Ah,
Desilu. But he's not the greatest original writer in the world because he keeps wanting to say the same thing. But
meet God over and
yeah,
over.
right,
That's a good point. That's a great. But that was fascinating to hear that he said two types of humans, and there's a new type of human emerging, and
yeah,
that just reminded me when you mentioned Uhura talking to that uh, kid for like the
yeah,
young
yeah,
Federation. Yeah, the kind of the old, and you get that kind of older as they age. You kind of get that dichotomy, but oh, I do love. Yeah, I. It's a fascinating film. To me, it's a fascinating film on its own. It's so different than other Star Trek films. It's different than a lot of science fiction. Different than like the space opera type of science fiction.
yes.
Definitely like 2001. Um, Trying to think of any other films that it kind of rings a bell that it's like that kind of that you think of similar to. Um, Day There Stood Still. Think of the Robert Wise.
Day the Earth Stood Still has some of the same thematic elements, I think, in it. Just it's completely earthbound, but that's certainly there. And I think that, we talked Interstellar, that
Right.
obviously was along that. And I don't know, maybe to an extent, even The Martian. where it's a completely
Wow.
different kind of film, but it's a voyage of discovery.
Right. Absolutely. That's a good point. That's a really good point. And has that sense a little bit more of, yeah, the pacing is similar,
Yeah.
especially at the beginning. Yeah, that's a good point. The Voyage of Discovery trying to, that's a really good point. But it's a small niche of films that it kind of fits into. And I like them. I value them. I also value the way Star Trek changed,
Yes.
and they
This
explored more of
film
the
made it
human.
happen. I think that the theme in Star Trek 2 would not have happened without this film. This incredible filming model that they had for all of the original series films was better than they would have had under any other circumstance. And I really like their warp effect.
Oh yeah,
They've never
yeah.
done the same warp effect twice in any of the shows for some reason, but
Or the
this
same
one,
bridge.
well, yeah. Well,
It's
you could
ship
go
kids.
between episodes of the original series that the bridge would change, but
That's true. But the movies, it completely
it
changes.
did. It
I
did.
mean,
Well, in
even new
Star Trek
rooms
Six,
are.
they had to redress the oh, what was it? I guess it was the Enterprise D sets in order to depict the Enterprise. William Shatner said in his book Star Trek Movie Memories that was the first time he'd ever driven a used ship.
That's funny. Yeah, they were never used, and there was always a new model. That's a good point. How about what sound effects? What did you anything in? I mean, I love the music. Anything hit you with
They
sound
almost
effects? And,
completely changed out the sound effects in the director's cut. They went back to sounds that were made by the ship in subsequent movies and even in the original series. And I think that helped some their their transporter effect had a different sound. I didn't like the transporter effect either. The original series, they basically sprinkled glitter in front of a light and then filmed it upside down, and that worked. All you had to do was
beautiful.
just mat in the fade in for the character to appear, and in this, they cartooned something in that looked kind of like Jello before it set.
Yeah, even when it was appearing, trying to form perfect correctly, it still looked like shit. That's a great
Yeah.
point. That's a really good point.
But they did
Oh,
they did
the
fix the sound effects in the reshoot. A lot of them were very basic, just and a boomy voice for the computer, which I think they changed that too.
oh, right. No, did they change the? Yeah, the computer voice was it? I should have paid better attention.
Emergency
It was
alert, negative control at helm. I mean,
yeah, they
that
didn't.
kind of stuff.
That's a
I think it
good
was
point.
taken out of the director's cut.
Wow, that's a fascinating point. Yeah, the no, and the music synchro. Apparently, there is watching it this time. I did catch just a tiny bit of Alexander Courage. There's not much there. I think it's
No,
during one of the captain's logs,
yeah,
and there's a little nod of the
I
head
think it's
to
right after they get out of the wormhole. They use just an echo of the theme, but they don't use the Trek fanfare.
right.
That's the only Star Trek movie that does not use the Trek fanfare. And part of it probably is because it was stolen to begin with. Because it was, if you ever saw 12 O'Clock High,
Yes.
anytime they showed the planes in flight, they had that fanfare. It
No.
was orchestrated differently, but that was later the
That was the
Enterprise theme.
fanfare for.
But yeah, find any 12 O'Clock High episode, and usually the last scene is they're flying the plane back home or whatever. They'll have that fanfare.
They'll have the fan. Wow. No, I didn't. I didn't realize that had been borrowed. That's
Stolen
so.
ideas. There isn't a sci-fi film out there that hasn't stolen all our ideas.
Oh
Doesn't keep it
man.
from being entertaining though.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Well, I hope you were entertained by our discussion today. So, you have anything else you want to add before we go away?
I think we have covered acting. We've covered the various scripts. We've covered Star Trek Phase Two, which is fascinating. I love that. I
Yeah,
love that history. The film made money, thank goodness.
yeah,
Against every where they really didn't think it was going to make money, it made money, and that led, of course, to the Wrath of Khan.
yes,
And one thing I did find out, one last thing, is apparently they had even thought, even apparently early on in making the movie, they thought, okay, yeah, great, we're making a movie, but we're still going to go back to TV series. But the movie did well enough, they just set it in stone that we're going to do movies after this and
yeah,
no more Star Trek series. I love the idea of Star Trek Phase, like a movie, maybe like the NBC, what was it, the movie of the week or
yes.
something, where they had those four
That
series
yeah,
and
they were
they
thinking. Yeah, they called it 4-in-1 at first. Then it was NBC Mystery Movie, and then it was the Sunday Mystery Movie. And they used McLeod and Banachek and Columbo and Heck
the one with Rock
Ramsey.
Hudson.
Heck Ramsey. Oh yeah,
Right.
McMillan and Wife, Heck Ramsey, and something else. I forget.
And I thought that would be so cool for to have a
But they had
really
that at the
good,
time, and
well
that,
made
that
film.
they were thinking about doing that with Trek, and I thought that might have been pretty good at the time.
Yeah, give time for effects, time for good writing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah. But it turned into movies, and thank goodness it did. Oh my goodness.
It's lasted a lot
No,
longer
that's
that way.
all.
I'm certain.
Say it again.
It's lasted a lot longer. I'm certain, or else
Yeah, true.
it would be
Oh my
remembered like
goodness.
Heck Ramsey is. So
Right. I'm drawing a blank.
yeah, it was Richard Boone, I think, as an old man in a cowboy hat. I'm not sure what it was about because I didn't watch it. It was his post Paladin days. Nevertheless, he was a cowboy in New York City. I think that's how it worked out. Some kind of investigator. They had to have investigators that all kind of things. They had a blind detective and a deaf detective and a fat detective and an old detective
Cannon. Yeah.
and well,
Yeah.
or whatever Barnaby Jones was supposed to be. So
Where's yeah, a little age challenged as we
yeah. So anyway,
So that is all I got. I love
all right.
covering this. This was so much fun.
Yes, and we will be away next week. By the way, we'll do this again in a couple of weeks, and by that time we will have fully digested the first couple of episodes of Strange New Worlds for this season. So
Absolutely.
we'll sneak that in between whatever movie we're talking about next time.
Can't wait.
All right, I can't either. Enjoyed it. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and don't go far.